What if Darth Maul discovered the spirit of Exar Kun on Yavin 4, Part 2?
Brother.
Maul's body jerks awake, his breath coming in ragged gasps as confusion clouds his mind. His yellow-red eyes dart around the sterile, cold holding cell, the restraints binding him to the floor. He can't remember how he got here. His thoughts are jumbled, fragmented like pieces of a shattered mirror.
What happened?
His voice is barely a whisper, laced with fear and uncertainty. He clenches his fists, feeling the weight of the restraints, his head pounding as the memories begin to surface. Slowly, painfully. The soft sound of footsteps echo in the hallway, growing louder. The shadow of a temple guard looms through the glowing barrier of his cell. Maul's gaze sharpens, but the disorientation doesn't fully fade. The guard's presence is calm, but there is an unreadable tension in the air.
You're awake.
Maul blinks, his mind still hazy, trying to focus on the words. His chest tightens as he reaches for the missing pieces of his memories.
I was with him. My brother, Savage.
The guard tilts his head, trying to process the half-coherent words. Maul's eyes close briefly, a flash of memory hitting him like a wave. He remembers the temple on Yavin 4, the rage, the lightsabers clashing, the force swirling, and the overwhelming presence of him, Exar Kun. He had taken his brother there to seek the power of a long-dead Sith. He winces at the memory. He remembers Savage, his loyal brother, fighting alongside him, but there had been something off about that fight. The pain in his mind begins to resurface. The devastating loss. Exar Kun took control of his brother's mind and body, and shackled Maul's own mind to do his bidding, like a dog.
Savage.
The name falls from his lips, heavy with grief. The guard stands still, watching Maul carefully. Maul's eyes flash with a raw fury as he continues.
We took the huts, turned them, and killed.
A sneer, disgusted with the memory.
The Hutt cartel thought they could control the Outer Rim, but we controlled them. We used them to further our cause. We set a trap for the Jedi. Zero. We let him contact you. Then we killed him and waited. Yoda and Voss, they came. We fought. My brother, gone. He was struck down by Voss. No, struck down by him.
The thoughts flood back, each one more fragmented than the last, until the pieces begin to fall into place. Maul's heart races as he recalls the final moments. He grits his teeth, the bitter taste of failure rising in his throat, and he looks around the cell.
The plan. It worked.
His face drops at the realization. It turns to fear. His mind skips over the details, focusing instead on the final vision before his capture. The obelisk. The terror it inspired. The dark power pulsing from it like a heartbeat.
The obelisk. I have to stop it. We need to stop it.
The guard takes a cautious step forward, watching Maul closely.
What about this obelisk? What are you talking about?
Maul's breath quickens, his eyes wide with desperation.
It's not just a relic. It's the key. The key to something worse. It's tied to a dark presence. A force that took me. That used me.
He struggles against the restraints, pulling against his ankles as if to break free by sheer will.
I was part of something larger. Exar Kun. He forced me. It's his power. It's all about him. The ritual. He's planning to use us to feed his power through the obelisk. If it isn't destroyed, we are all doomed.
His voice is frantic now, his body trembling with fear and anger, but the guard remains silent, unable to understand the magnitude of Maul's words.
You really have lost your mind, haven't you? Destroy it. If you don't, the darkness will consume us all. The obelisk is more dangerous than you can imagine.
Before the guard can respond, Maul's body convulses violently as the dark energy surges within him once more. His screams echo in the cell as his mind is overtaken. the presence of Exar Kun reasserting its control. The guard steps back, uncertain, as Maul's consciousness slips once more into the void. Yoda sits cross-legged before a low table in the quiet of the archives, the flickering hologram of a dark, ancient symbol rotating slowly in the air before him. His gimmer stick rests beside him, temporarily set aside as he studies the ominous image. For weeks, Maul's collective have been causing chaos across the Outer Rim. As most of the Council investigates that, he and the archivists have been scouring for anything regarding this symbol since Maul's capture a few days ago. Jocasta Nu approaches from nearby, her expression concerned.
Master Yoda, our research finds this symbol matches records from the Great Sith War. The mark of Dark Lord, placed on the forehead. The mark was worn by multiple Dark Lords, most recently, Exar Kun.
Yoda's ears twitch as he examines the hologram.
An echo of his power, this is. A bridge to his will, perhaps. Dangerous, it remains.
Could this mark have anything to do with Maul's condition? And perhaps the other disturbances you've sensed?
Yoda closes his eyes, reaching out with the Force. A ripple of darkness brushes against his mind, faint but unmistakable. He opens his eyes, now filled with worry.
Closer the shadow grows. Unseen by us, it moves. What it hides, discover we must.
Jocasta's concern deepens.
If Exar Kun is truly involved, we could be facing a threat not seen in a millennia.
Yoda rises, retrieving his gimmer stick.
Much remains unclear. Watchful we must be.
Without another word, Yoda exits the archives, his steps urgent and deliberate. He must question Maul. A figure moves through the dimly lit hallways of the temple, their steps deliberate and soundless. They pause near a concealed access panel, glancing around to ensure the corridor is empty. The faint hum of the terminal activates as a hand touches it, bypassing security systems with a deft precision. The console flashes green, signaling success. With a faint smirk, the figure steps back into the shadows, disappearing into the labyrinthine corridors of the temple. Simultaneously, in the depths of the city's underbelly, Shadow Collective operatives wait in the shadows, their faces obscured by masks and helmets. A massive repulsor lift transport sits in their midst, its cargo concealed beneath heavy coverings. One of the operatives speaks into a comlink.
Perimeter defenses are down. We have a window.
As the operatives tense in preparation for their next move, the coverings are pulled back, revealing the obelisk. It hums faintly, the dark runes etched into its surface, flickering like blue embers. The operatives begin moving it toward a deep-level maintenance entrance.
Move carefully. The security systems are cleared, but the Jedi are not blind.
As the obelisk is guided into the shadows of the temple's lower levels, its dark energy pulses faintly, as though anticipating the chaos to come. Yoda enters the dimly lit detention sector, his small frame silhouetted against the faint glow of the containment field. Maul sits slumped against the wall, his breathing shallow, the dark mark on his forehead faintly pulsing like a festering wound. Yoda steps closer, his gimmer stick tapping softly against the floor.
Awake, I see you are, Maul. Peace you must find, if to speak we are.
Maul's head lifts slightly, his fiery eyes meeting Yoda's with a flicker of clarity. But his most recent episode once again leaves him confused.
You... again.
He rasps.
Again, here I am. Broken your mind is not. Hope there still is.
For a moment, silence stretches between them, before Maul's lips curl into a bitter smirk.
Broken. Yes. Like before.
His voice trembles, bitterness and fear intertwining.
Like when I was discarded, left to rot, my mind shattered into shards like glass, taken out with the trash.
He presses his head against the wall, his voice softening.
This is worse.
Yoda tilts his head, listening intently.
Speak of what binds you. What holds your mind in chains?
Maul grimaces, struggling to form the words.
Him. Kun. He's inside. Bending me. Twisting me. Like a puppet on strings.
His gaze sharpens suddenly.
It's like you said. Drowning in darkness. I fight, but he always pulls me under.
He growls, his voice low and venomous. But the panic returns as he remembers once more. His eyes go wide before they rush to meet Yoda's gaze, inches from the containment field.
You must listen. The obelisk. Destroy it before...
The calm hum of the temple is shattered by the blare of alarms as it enters into lockdown protocol. Yoda's ears twitch as his focus shifts and he turns toward the door. Maul's head snaps up, his expression shifting to one of alarm.
He's here.
The sound of footsteps echoes down the corridor, steady and purposeful. The door to the detention wing slides open, revealing a lone figure cloaked in shadow, steam billowing from the dead guards by his feet. Voss steps into the light, his expression calm but unreadable. His gaze sweeps across the room before settling on Maul and Yoda.
Quinlan.
Yoda says, his tone cautious but firm.
Or another name prefer, do you?
Voss doesn't answer immediately. Instead, he takes another step forward. As he does, a faint, sizzling sound fills the air, and the mark of the Dark Lord begins to etch itself into his forehead. The burned flesh glows faintly as the mark solidifies, and Voss's eyes flash with a cold, unnatural blue.
Master Yoda,
Voss says, his voice carrying a strange, layered echo.
the time for subtlety has passed.
Chaos erupts across the temple as the Shadow Collective storms through the subterranean entrances. Heavily armored and enhanced by Exar Kun's influence, the operatives tear through the Jedi defenders with brutal efficiency. Blue-tinted eyes glow beneath their masks, and as the skirmishes intensify, several operatives lose their masks in the fray, revealing the dark marks burned into their foreheads. In the chaos, the heavily protected group moves with precision, escorting the obelisk. Encased in a floating containment field, it hums with dark energy, its runes glowing brighter with each passing moment. The group cuts through the resistance, their goal clear, to bring the obelisk to the heart of the temple. Yoda steps forward, his gimmer stick steady in his grasp as he faces Voss.
Fallen you have, but yours this choice was not. Free yourself, you still can.
Voss's lips curl into a cruel smile.
There is no Quinlan Voss anymore, Master Yoda. Only Exar Kun.
With a sudden burst of force energy, Voss raises a hand, sending Yoda flying backward. The Grand Master somersaults midair, landing gracefully on his feet, his gimmer stick clattering to the floor. Voss strides toward Maul's cell, and with a wave of his hand, deactivates the restraints holding him. Maul stumbles forward, catching his head as the dark energy within him surges.
Rise, my loyal servant.
Kun's voice echoes through Voss, bouncing across the recesses of Maul's mind, pounding away at the back of his eyes as they flicker blue. The ancient Sith unclips the saber staff from his belt and tosses it at Maul's feet.
The Jedi will fall, starting with their greatest.
Yoda extends a hand, pushing into Maul's mind with the Force. But before he can act, Voss thrusts his palm outward. A shock wave of force energy slams Yoda, pinning him against the wall. Kun's voice rises in power, reverberating through the chamber.
Even you, Master Yoda, cannot resist the inevitable.
Yoda closes his eyes, his face contorted in concentration. Through sheer will, he begins to push back against the invisible grip of the icy cold tendrils of Kun's influence. The Force swirls violently around them, the air thick with the clash of light and dark. Maul, now freed, takes a hesitant step forward, his gaze flickering between Yoda and Voss. For a brief moment, the clarity returns to his eyes.
Kun, you will not control me.
He snarls, his voice defiant. Kun's laughter echoes from Voss's lips.
You think you have a choice?
Maul, his crimson blade bursting to life with fury, fights with the desperation of a man grasping at the last fragments of his mind. The force grip on Yoda releases, and he drops lightly to the ground. He grips his lightsaber hilt, igniting the brilliant green blade. Kun's expression twists into a sneer as he parries a strike from Maul, while leaning back beneath a flying strike from Yoda.
Do you think you can resist me, Maul? You have been mine since the moment your broken mind called out in despair. I heard you when you lost your legs. I heard you when you lost your mind. I heard you when you lost your brother. I have always heard you.
Maul roars, surging forward with renewed ferocity. His strikes grow wilder, erratic but powerful, his will battling against the oppressive force within. Yoda, sensing Maul's momentary clarity, moves in tandem with him. Together they force Kun to retreat, the ancient Sith's control briefly faltering under their combined assault. Kun's lips curl into a dark smile.
So much fire, but it always burns itself out in the end.
With a surge of power, he sends a shockwave rippling through the room, slamming both Maul and Yoda into the opposing wall. Yoda groans softly, pushing himself to his feet. His lightsaber hums back to life just as Kun strides toward Maul, who struggles to rise.
Maul, you are mine.
Always.
He raises his hand, and the dark mark on Maul's forehead ignites with an even brighter, burning glow. Maul screams, clutching his head as Kun's will overwhelms him. The crimson glow in his eyes dims, replaced by the cold, icy blue of Kun's influence. His lightsaber clatters to the ground as he falls to his knees.
No!
Yoda cries, rushing forward, his blade arcing toward Kun. Kun spins with precision, meeting Yoda's strike with his own. Their blades lock, and for a moment it seems Yoda might overpower him. But Kun twists his hand, and with a flash of energy, Yoda's lightsaber shatters, the blade extinguished in a burst of sparks. Kun raises his free hand, and shadows pull from the walls, forming into chains of dark energy. They whip forward, wrapping around Yoda and binding him tightly, pulling him to the ground.
Even the Grand Master bows.
Kun muses, stepping closer.
I expected more.
Yoda glares up at him, his breathing steady despite the bindings.
Pride blinds you, Kun. Know nothing of the Force, do you?
Kun chuckles, his gaze shifting to Maul, who now stands silently, his expression devoid of emotion. The two raise their hands together, sending Yoda flying into the far wall of a holding cell.
Come, dog. Leave the old fool to watch as his precious order crumbles.
Kun and Maul turn to leave, the shadows sealing the room as they exit. As they step into the corridor, Kun revels in his triumph.
To see the fall of everything you've built. This will be his final torment.
Maul follows, his movements robotic, his will seemingly crushed. But as they walk away, he slows for the briefest of moments, his fingers twitching. Unseen by Kun, Maul uses the Force to slide Yoda's gimmer stick across the floor, stopping it just within the Grand Master's eyeline. Chaos reigns as the Shadow Collective pushes further into the Jedi Temple. The obelisk, protected by a heavily armed group of operatives, hums with growing intensity, its power spreading through the walls like a disease. Jedi defenders fight valiantly, but the dark energy seeping from the obelisk begins to take its toll. Whispers fill their minds, promises of strength and power. A young knight falters mid-strike, his lightsaber slipping from his grasp. His eyes flash blue for a moment, and he screams, clutching his head as the dark mark begins to etch itself into his forehead. Nearby, another Jedi lashes out violently, their movements erratic as they succumb to the obelisk's influence. "Stay back," they shout, their blade turning on their allies. The defenders grow increasingly desperate, their unity unraveling as Kun's power spreads. The tainted body of Voss steps briskly out to witness his chaos. Maul, at heel, a step behind. A wicked grin spreads over his face as he leans out over a rail as more and more of the lesser knights and Padawans wane to his power. It is his beginning once again, and the end of the Jedi. In the quiet of the sealed room, Yoda stirs. His eyes fall on the gimmer stick resting just beyond his reach. With a faint smile, he stretches out his hand, calling it to him through the Force. As his fingers curl around the familiar wood, a spark of hope ignites in his eyes. Using the Force, Yoda examines the room. The bindings on the cell are strong. They are designed to house Force wielders, but there is something else tied to the obelisk's presence in the temple. But Yoda is not deterred. His gimmer stick, simple though it may be, becomes an extension of his will. He uses it to hook a small exposed control panel near the door. Carefully, he manipulates the stick, leveraging it to pry open the panel. Sparks fly as he disrupts the circuit, and the faint hum of the cell begins to falter. The dark energy pushes back, but Yoda closes his eyes, focusing his mind. The barrier weakens, flickering as he channels the Force into the gimmer stick. With a final surge of effort, the stick crackles with a spark, and the containment field collapses. Yoda steps free, his gaze hardening. Though he's without his weapon, he moves with purpose. Quietly, with urgency, his small frame blending into the shadows of the Jedi Temple's halls. This part of the temple is eerily silent, though far-off saber clashing and blaster fire still breaks here and there. His mind reaches out through the Force, seeking connection, but he feels only emptiness where the familiar presence of his fellow masters should be. He pauses by a communications console embedded in the wall. With a flick of his wrist, the panel slides open, and he quickly scans the systems. The interface is unresponsive, the signal scrambled. Yoda strokes his chin thoughtfully. Sabotage this is, he thinks. He extends his senses, probing the intricate threads of the Force. Flashes of insights come to him. Quinlan Voss moving through the temple's corridors, subtly tampering with systems. The Shadow Collective's operatives cutting off external communications. And more troubling, the lingering darkness of the obelisk pulsing through the temple, clouding the Force itself. The obelisk's influence creates a heavy, suffocating presence, making it difficult to focus. But Yoda persists, piecing together the situation. He recalls the deployment of Jedi Masters to various fronts upon his own order. In recent days, reports of Maul's activity had drawn the Council's attention to distant systems. Kun's plan was clear now. Lure the strongest away from the temple to weaken its defenses. Yoda's brow furrows as he remembers. Even Windu, away he is, investigating whispers of the Shadow Collective. Only a skeleton crew of Jedi Knights and Padawans remain in the temple, woefully unprepared for the coordinated assault. A faint flicker in the Force draws Yoda's attention, and he turns toward the central corridors. The obelisk's presence growing stronger, its malevolent energy spreading like a disease.
No help will come,
he says softly to himself. As he moves deeper into the temple, he keeps his senses alert. The gimmer stick in his hand, though simple, serves as a reminder of his connection to the light. The chamber beneath the Jedi Temple is vast and ancient. At its center stands the obelisk, pulsing with malevolent energy, its dark runes flickering as if hungry for the ritual to begin. A large gathering of converted Jedi and Shadow Collective warriors kneel before it, their blue-tinged eyes vacant, awaiting Kun's command. Nearby, restrained captives, those who resisted Kun's influence, watch in horror, their expressions tense. Among them, Jocasta Nu struggles against her bindings, her sharp eyes locked on the towering obelisk.
You cannot do this.
Her voice, though wary, remains firm.
These Jedi, you mean to slaughter them to feed your own cursed artifact?
Kun, standing before the obelisk, turns slowly, his presence an overwhelming weight in the darkened chamber. His stolen vessel, Quinlan Voss, smirks, but his voice carries the ancient Sith Lord's unmistakable arrogance.
Sacrifice is the cornerstone of power, Master Nu. They are not dying. They are ascending. Their life force will complete what was begun centuries ago.
You failed before, and you will fail again.
Kun's eyes narrow. He steps toward her, the shadows twisting around his form as he raises a hand. Jocasta gasps as an invisible force tightens around her throat, lifting her slightly off the ground. The other prisoners recoil, but none dare move against him.
It is inevitable. With their spirits bound to the obelisk, my dominion will extend beyond death itself. The Jedi Order will drown in shadow. And you...
He tilts his head, studying her with amusement.
You will bear witness to the rebirth of a true Sith Empire.
Jocasta gasps for breath, but forces out her words.
I will not let this happen.
She grits her teeth, the fire in her eyes undimmed despite the pain. Kun chuckles, releasing his grip, letting her collapse back onto the stone floor.
Then you will watch helplessly as they give themselves to me, willingly.
Behind Kun, Maul stands in silence, his expression unreadable as he observes the captives. The others see only a loyal enforcer at Kun's side, but inside Maul's mind is a battlefield. The Sith Lord's control still coils around his thoughts, but he resists, waiting for the right moment. Kun turns his gaze to the kneeling Jedi, lifting his hands. The dark aura around the obelisk intensifies, the air thickening with ancient power.
It begins.
The chamber trembles as Exar Kun raises his arms, dark energy rippling from the obelisk like waves of liquid shadow. The kneeling Jedi, those he has corrupted, do not flinch. Their faces remain blank, their minds ensnared by the ancient Sith Lord's will. A low hum builds in the air, growing louder as the ritual begins. Jocasta Nu, still on her knees, watches in horror as the first of the converted Jedi rises to their feet, stepping toward the obelisk with eerie synchronicity. Their hands lift, reaching for the dark stone, their eyes vacant.
No!
She struggles against her bindings, the force thrumming within her, but she is weakened, drained from her capture. She turns her gaze toward Maul, locking eyes with him. For a split second, something passes between them, an unspoken understanding. He does nothing, merely watching as the first Jedi places his hands upon the obelisk. The moment his skin touches the stone, the chamber erupts with blinding darkness. The scream, raw, piercing, echoes as the Jedi's body convulses, his very essence being drained. His flesh blackens, disintegrating into dust, his life force sucked into the obelisk. The runes carved into its surface glow a deep, unnatural red. More Jedi step forward, ready to suffer the same fate. The air crackles with energy, the ritual accelerating. Jocasta clenches her jaw, heart pounding. She knows that if Kun succeeds, his influence will spread beyond this chamber, beyond Coruscant. He will become something more than a spirit bound to relics. Her mind races for a solution. She lifts her gaze again to Maul. His grip tightens around his double-bladed saber. His eyes narrowed, conflicted. From the shadows, a small figure steps forward. His movements are slow, deliberate. His green skin glows faintly in the dim, cursed light. Yoda. The chamber seems to hold its breath. Even Kun pauses. For the first time, something flickers in his expression. Surprise.
Much you have taken, Kun. But end here, your darkness will.
Kun recovers quickly, a smirk curling on Voss's lips.
Ah, Grandmaster. Right on time. Come to witness history?
Yoda's eyes lower to the sacrificed Jedi's ashes, his ears drooping slightly. His small hands grip his cane, but Jocasta can feel the force shifting around him, building.
Come to offer a trade, I have.
Kun narrows his eyes.
What could you possibly offer me?
Yoda steps closer, standing before the obelisk. The dark runes pulse in recognition of his power.
A vessel. One far stronger, and with much further reach than Voss it will have. One worthy of you.
A tense silence passes. Kun's interest is piqued.
You offer yourself.
Jocasta's eyes widen.
Master Yoda, no!
Kun studies him carefully, then chuckles.
A trap. You think to contain me again.
Yoda closes his eyes.
Trap you I may, but gone you will not be. Accept or destroy you, I will.
Kun hesitates. He glances at Maul, at the Jedi still resisting his control. His rebirth is not yet certain, and he needs more. But with Yoda as a host, his reach towards the Senate, his access to private meetings with another failure of a Sith, the Chancellor, Kun smiles.
Very well.
Kun scowls, his fingers curling into a fist. The shadows in the chamber surge, wrapping around him like a second skin. His essence bursts from Voss and slams into Yoda, wrapping around him in tendrils of shadow. Yoda stumbles, but he does not fall. Inside his mind, the real battle begins. Kun's presence is a storm, howling, clawing, devouring, but Yoda is a rock in the tide, unmoved. Kun pushes, seeking to corrupt. Yoda pushes back. His eyes snap open, a brilliant gold light cutting through the dark like beacons in a storm. Maul sees his chance.
Now!
Jocasta seizes her moment, reaching deep into herself, past her exhaustion. With a cry, she pulls at the Force, as Maul brings down his saber between her wrists, severing her bindings. She bursts to her feet, stumbling slightly, but she is free. The chamber explodes into chaos. The corrupted Jedi hesitate, confusion flickering in their blank eyes as the ritual falters. The obelisk hums with power, its surface writhing with dark energy, but its pull weakens. Yoda's body lifts from the ground as any and all debris and rubble from the previous battle is lifted with him. Kun tries to overpower. Yoda outlasts. Jocasta doesn't waste the opportunity. She calls upon the Force, summoning her lightsaber from across the chamber. The hilt snaps into her palm, and with a familiar hum, the blue blade ignites. She turns toward the nearest corrupt Jedi, ready to defend them from themselves. She and Maul fight back to back, moving toward the obelisk, both attempting to disable the corrupted.
You don't have to do this. Fight his control.
One of the Jedi hesitates, their breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps, but others remain enthralled, stepping forward in unison toward the obelisk. The ritual isn't fully broken. Kun still holds sway. The ancient Sith feels his ritual breaking. He attempts to flee Yoda's body, but the Grand Master does not allow him to leave, his spectral form flailing to escape the little green man. In a fit, the ghost hurls metal and rock around the chamber. Jocasta throws up a shield with the Force, protecting herself and the dazed Jedi at her side. She grits her teeth. This isn't over yet. Maul reaches the obelisk first, and with a determined resolve to resist, places both hands against its surface. A deep, rumbling hum fills the chamber. Jocasta follows, pressing her palms against the ancient stone as they both reel in pain. The moment she makes contact, she gasps. Visions flood her mind. She sees the past. Exar Kun in his prime, standing before the obelisk, performing this very ritual centuries ago. Masasi and Jedi scream as they are consumed, his laughter triumphant as his spirit twists as his former master and followers betray him, and he is bound to the temple and the obelisk. She sees the future. Coruscant in flames, the Sith reborn, darkness consuming the stars. No, she grits her teeth, pushing back, resisting, unwilling to give herself to the obelisk. Maul does the same, his energy surging into the obelisk, disrupting its hold. Kun roars in fury, his form flickering, his grip on the corrupted Jedi slipping further. Yoda still holding firm on the spirit.
I will not be denied.
But another set of hands land hard on the obelisk, as the vision is now split between three. Quinlan Voss. His eyes, once clouded by darkness, are clear, his jaw clenched, his expression one of sheer defiance.
Get out of my head!
With a guttural roar, Voss pushes. The Force erupts from him in a shockwave, severing Kun's last hold on his mind. Jocasta seizes the moment. She channels the Force, pouring everything she has into breaking the last tether of Kun's ritual. More and more Jedi are freed, and more sets of hands are placed on the stone. Their unwillingness to kneel to Kun, their power to resist, their light pouring into the runes. The obelisk shatters. A burst of light engulfs the chamber as the three are tossed back. Kun's spirit is expelled from Yoda's mind, but he is no longer whole. He is weakened, reduced, panicked, his very essence unraveling. The dark energy, desperate for a host, desperate for something, latches on to the nearest object, the gimmer stick. The wood darkens, veins of eerie blue running through it as the last remnants of Kun's soul are sealed within. It clatters to the ground with an unnatural deepness that echoes through the bowels of the Jedi Temple. Silence reigns. Yoda breathes deeply as his feet touch the ground, his eyes steady on the now tainted walking stick. The battle is over. Kun is imprisoned, once more. Jocasta Nu kneels beside Maul, who breathes heavily, his body failing, but his mind his own. His yellowed eyes meet Yoda's.
Truly, a Grandmaster.
Yoda retrieves the gimmer stick, the very staff that now holds Kun's essence. The dark veins pulsing through the wood are the only remnant of the Sith Lord's presence.
Much we have lost, but more we have saved.
Across the chamber, Quinlan Voss stumbles, catching himself against a fallen pillar. His body is drenched in sweat, his breath ragged, as if his very soul has been wrung out. Jocasta rushes to his side. He blinks at her, his golden eyes, his real eyes, no longer tainted by Kun's possession.
It's me. He's gone.
Jocasta exhales, relief and exhaustion crashing over her at once.
Yes, he is.
Voss looks at the remains of the obelisk, the shattered stone now nothing more than dust beneath their feet. He runs a shaking hand through his hair.
He used me.
He mutters, looking around to the other Jedi and Padawans getting to their feet, his eyes landing on Maul.
Used all of us.
Yoda watches him carefully, then nods.
Strong the dark side was, but stronger you all were.
Voss exhales sharply.
Didn't feel like it.
He glances down at Maul, the enemy who had, in the end, fought beside him. The Zabrak, weak but alive, watches him in turn. For a long moment, neither speaks.
Guess we owe you one.
Maul snorts.
Keep it. I don't do debts.
He lifts his hands out in surrender. Despite everything, Voss chuckles as he clamps bindings around the assassin's wrists. And as the last embers of battle fade, the survivors make their way back toward the light. Weeks later, Yoda moves carefully through the swamp, his small form barely visible against the misty backdrop of a place he would one day call home. His gimmer stick, the one now holding Exar Kun, is absent, locked deep in the vaults of the Jedi Temple under heavy guard. As he scans the ground around him, he picks up a twisted branch from the swamp floor, turning it over in his hands. The rich, damp wood seems to whisper. Yoda smiles faintly.
Not the end for you this place is, but a beginning.
That's our theory. The Star Wars universe is a galaxy filled with exciting stories and possibilities, and we love exploring them. If you want to accompany us on this journey to a galaxy far, far away, then please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Somewhere in the high towers of Coruscant, a dark figure sits in his private chambers. He examines a datapad, his eyes narrowing as he reads the report detailing the recapture of Darth Maul, concerning the battle in the temple, amusing, and the dark fate of Yoda's gimmer stick. The image of the staff, now corrupted by Kun's essence, flickers in rotation on the screen. Palpatine's lips curl into a twisted smile.
A power still contained.
He leans back in his chair, his fingers tapping the desk slowly.
A power far from dead.